All right. Welcome to Tougies Take, episode 19, the episode where I stopped trying to say the word like so much because my mom gave me some real constructive feedback. Tougie, how are you doing?
Did she really?
Oh, she did. In person, no less.
I was going to say, I'm intrigued to know exactly what she said, because for me, there are certain aspects of, I guess, your speaking pattern, right? Where a lot of times you're a lot more reflective. You do actually think before you speak to not just ramble and fill time so that you can deliver your point properly. But I think that's a problem that all of us have, is using like to fill in that time. And it's something I know I've actively tried to avoid, but it's not easy. For example, I really could have said like right there.
Really
so shout out to DeJ's mom for being on point and one of our more constructive listeners, apparently.
Yeah, she was on a road trip. She listened to presumably 11 hours worth of episodes. And she said, Doug, you say like too much. And your sister used to have the same problem, but she was able to get over it. So I know you can do it too. I was like, oh, thanks. Thanks, sibling pressure.
We might have an episode title already. This is the intro now.
All right. Well, we're back from the intro. I've been watching a lot of episodes of The Rich Eisen Show, so I'm trying to use his cadence to deliver because he famously conquered a Brooklyn accent, which is the mountain that few people are able to climb. And so we'll get to some viewer questions. Number one comes from Melwan. His question is, what makes a good podcast question? To which I will respond. A good podcast question is like pornography. I can't define it for you, but I know it when I see it.
Oh, this is going to be a hell of a show. You're setting the bar high at this stage. What makes a good podcast question? One like that allows Deej to hit a home run 30 seconds into the show. Another, we actually had quite a few good podcast questions last episode, Deej, because if you recall, I think the first 50 minutes of the show was just responding to podcast questions. So my favorite ones are the ones that, number one, aren't repeat questions. We might have one of those in this list, though. But also, of course, the ones that actually lead to just a really good flowing conversation, which will this question ultimately be labeled a good podcast question? No. But I appreciate the attempt.
All right. Attempt appreciated. Our next question comes from someone named Joey. Joey says, how can Crocs come back from this royal screw-up of the Lightning McQueen Crocs drop? Now, I don't know about you, Tougie, but I had to look up several words in this question. And you know what? I think the only way Crocs can come back is if they start referring to children's Crocs as Garials.
So, first and foremost, I never thought I'd see the word Lightning McQueen Crocs, but they are apparently a thing. Secondly, I have recently discovered, and I'm sure Deej will appreciate this as someone who keeps an eye on the stock market in a way. Crocs are up. Crocs are up. Buy now. Invest in Crocs, which is something I never thought I would say. Because out of nowhere in 2021, Crocs are apparently back in style. And when I'm seeing a headline from an hour ago from CNBC saying stocks making the biggest moves midday, Tesla, UBS, Crocs, I have to wonder what the hell is going on as to why Crocs are suddenly this incredibly valuable entity. But also, my favorite thing is when you search Crocs and the people also ask for, or section, are Crocs illegal? Is one of the most asked questions on Google. I have a feeling it's not related to the shoe, but it's probably related to the shoe. Who would have thought nearly 20 years later we would still be talking about Crocs? It's unbelievable.
Well, one of my friends over the pandemic, he got a pair of, I believe they call the pattern like Realtree. Oh, I did it. I'm sorry, Mom. I believe they call the pattern Realtree, where it's camouflaged. And he bought a pair of Realtree Crocs and he told me about it and I didn't know how to react. And that's how I feel about this question. Crocs, if you're a gardener, they make a lot of sense, but I'm just so genuinely confused by them. Maybe as like a wearable to the hockey rink. I won't say they're ugly because that's subjective to taste. I just find them innately confusing. They're like a Salvador Dali painting for your feet. I don't know.
Crocs, a Salvador Dali painting for your feet. I mean, we could get into an entire conversation about the practicality of Crocs. And like you said, they're useful for numerous different reasons. But hopefully they'll be okay. And I have a feeling they will be. That they will be. If they're launching Lightning McQueen Crocs, you have to be doing just fine to have the confidence to run with an idea like that.
Yeah. I know there's like I'm going to get disowned. I know there's an issue with wearing Crocs on escalators.
The episode title, by the way, is Self-Conscious Podcaster. Thanks,
Self-Conscious
Mom.
Podcaster. There is an issue with wearing Crocs on escalators that you should definitely look up before investing in a pair. It has something to do with static electricity. I don't really understand it, but that's all I could tell you here. And I think I've spent more time talking about foam footwear than I ever thought I would for the rest of my life in this last 10 minutes.
Yeah. No, I mean, hey, you never know. You never know what life's going to throw at you, right? We will move on just because I'm stunned. We're both stunned, I think, by that question. Deej, right before we started recording, looked at that and said, what the hell is this? And the look on his face was only rivaled to the look on his face when he showed me. And Deej, I know you have it on your desk. Your lovely new DS game that I still can't get over the packaging, so I have to bring it up. I would love for you.
Here is my copy of...
to explain this.
So I ordered this from GameStop. You may know them from the stock market or your dying mall, but I ordered a copy of... So one of my friends got me into the Fire Emblem games. I ordered a copy of Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadow of Valentia, presuming it would not come packaged like this, which is like a step above how you would package street drugs. So I have this cartridge in a weird bubble.
Where the price tag is bigger than the game itself.
It is. Welcome to GameStop, where the price tag is bigger than the game itself. I don't know. Yeah, that's double confused moments for me today, and don't need to do a Sudoku. So got that work out of the way.
From Stephen Ellis, THN on Twitter, friend of the show, one Stephen Ellis. Again, a question we've gotten before, but hey, it's Stephen, so why not ask it again? And that would be favorite jersey that you own, which, hey, is a fair question because I continue to add to the collection, even though I'm behind on updating the lovely world of Instagram on it. Recently I picked up a blank UMaine jersey. Also picked up a Jillian Dempsey Boston Pride jersey, which I'm very, very happy with. And then obviously you got some sentimental ones like the Rumble jersey, just because that exists for the sole purpose of what I've done on multiple different platforms. it's still the Ray Bourque Avs jersey. It has to be. And like I said, it is autographed. I can't 100% prove the authenticity, but I don't really care because I'm never selling it. It's my favorite jersey ever. So there you go. Deej, for you, I'm intrigued, though, because I honestly don't remember your answer from last time.
I have a pretty big jersey collection. And I think that would surprise a lot of people, the amount of non-Florida teams I have. However, my answer last time was the Ryan Johansson jersey that my friend Zach had given me. Shout out to Zach. But I really like my Aaron Ekblad reverse retro. It's probably just because it's new and it's shiny. I have a black Sharks Brent Burns jersey that I'm quite fond of. So I don't know, probably one of those two. Or, my old mainstay and the one that I wear to most games is this white Barkov jersey that I got during the Reebok closeouts. So it was dirt cheap. And it's an authentic one before Adidas made the prices sky high. And I've been able to add to it. So I was able to add the C when Barkov was named captain. I was able to add the 25th anniversary patch during that season when Barkov was wearing it. And so that's my mainstay. That's the one I wear to most games. That said, I had never collected player sticks before. And my dad did some work for a charity a few weeks ago. It was a mental health charity. And they gave him a Steve Montador stick, which was one of the items that they were raffling off. I guess he won it in a silent auction. And so I think that's super cool. So
I agree. That's incredible.
Especially, he only played for the Panthers that one season, but with everything he did for CTE awareness and the NHL and stuff, it's a really cool thing to have.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. I can't say I have anything along those lines. So that's tremendous. I will say, in regards to the Florida Panthers reverse retro, and you know this, I want one desperately. I do have. I've had a couple of different Panthers jerseys. I had the old white Pavel Bure era Panthers uni, but I discovered that just kind of the collars and the way those old CCMs were made, not really for me in terms of hey, I'm going to wear this jersey. It would have been something to box up. You also have, right now, currently I have the Roberto Luongo Panthers jersey, which I'm a pretty big fan of, but I would totally move on from that to end up with one of those reverse retros. It's a phenomenal jersey. And I will say, too, I've gone back and forth a lot between San Jose jerseys. Do I like the black alternates? Do I like just the normal teal? I'm not sure. Right now, I have a normal teal. I actually have a Joe Thornton, which, oh boy, don't worry, Jets fans. We'll be talking about Joe Thornton in a little bit because he's had an interesting week. Holy hell, has he had an interesting week. But yeah, it's been nice. I finally have my full collection back with me for the first time in a while. And it's just a lovely thing to have your entire collection. And you just look at this and be like, this is so much money. What am I doing with my life? I love it. I love it so much.
What color is your Luongo jersey?
It's the current home jersey for the Luongo jersey.
Oh, cool. Cool. Right on.
Yeah. Panthers jerseys, I got to be honest. A lot of people don't like, there hasn't been a Panthers jersey that I don't like in their history. Even that weird, mostly blue one with the alternate logo they had back in the day in the Reebok era. I like that one too.
Oh, so I like that one. I like they call it the Jet Blue jersey because we just overly did a Jet Blue sponsorship that year. The guy in charge of our advertising, his brother is actually the guy who decided to put stickers on the side of NASCARs. That's not a joke. That's a real thing. So, if you were to ask me as a Panthers fan if we've ever had a bad jersey, when Nike, was it Nike or Reebok? Yeah, when Reebok took over from CCM, I believe. Maybe it's Coho, maybe it's Jofa, one of those companies.
Coho was around quite a bit too. Around
but I guess that was 08, I guess, give or take. I did not like those jerseys. The navy and white with the weird piping were not for me.
I think a lot of those jerseys, like Blues fans too, shout out that era, that early Reebok era, is like, what the hell were these jerseys? Because there were a lot of them that had that weird like vertical piping. I think Caps jerseys had it too. So I get that. I understand that. It's a fair critique. We'll move on here because why not? This is from @TimAGoat7. So first and foremost, to you. What do the Blackhawks have to do to be a playoff contender again? Now, we've talked about Chicago quite a bit on the show. Stay the course. Stay the course. And I honestly think that Chicago will be fine. And we've talked about them a lot this year in terms of being a hell of a lot better than expected. Where would they be if Jonathan Toews was around and was fully healthy and in this lineup? There's a very good chance, especially with the particular division that they're in and seemingly how nobody wants that final spot, that they could have made the playoffs this year with Jonathan Toews. So genuinely enjoy the extra draft pick this year, and it's something I wanted to talk about. I think a lot of people are really downplaying this draft. I get it. A lot of these kids haven't played. You don't really know necessarily what you're going to get. It does seem like more of a crapshoot than ever, but there is some very, very good talents at face value, at least, in this draft. So I think a lot of people are maybe downplaying the value of these first-round picks just a little bit too much, and the benefit it could have for a team like Chicago to end up with a lottery pick. Who knows what happens? A couple months from now, we could be talking about the number one overall pick going to Chicago. You end up with someone like Owen Power to replace, an outgoing. I mean, obviously, Brent Seabrook is officially done. Duncan Keith will be, sooner rather than later. All things considered, a team like Chicago, I think, is going to benefit very well from not making the playoffs this year with the talent that they already have, too, whether it be, still Alex DeBrincat is still a younger guy, whether it be the Kirby Docks of the world, Nick Bodan on the blue line. Like, Chicago's going to be fine, barring some Jim Benning-like contracts that sink the team.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this theory last week. I'm pretty sure I did. But I guess the gist of it is, in order to be a cup winner, you need 2 star forwards. I'm talking all NHL star, not local market star. A star goaltender and a top 10 defenseman.
So sorry, Austin Matthews and the Toronto Maple Leafs.
When you say it like that, the Leafs have to have their own style of hockey, but I'll get to that later. For Chicago, the only thing they are missing to be not just in the playoffs, but this is, when you say playoff contender, I assume you mean making a run for the conference finals, for the cup. They need a top 10 defenseman. They had one for a long time. Keith got old. It just happens. So Lankinen has obviously been an absolute revelation. DeBrincat's a borderline star. He's not really going to sell jerseys outside of the Chicago market. And I think that's a good litmus test to see who a star is.
That's fair. That's a fair point.
If they can get a top 10 defenseman, Chicago's scary. So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's a really good point too, right? About those particular jerseys. And I think you're right too with DeBrincat. It's tough, obviously, for him directly, right? When you think of like, who's he going to naturally be compared to? And it's, he's playing alongside Patrick Kane, so that's the obvious comparison there. But yeah, no, Chicago is pretty far along to being right back where they need to be. I like the point of Duncan Keith got old. Breaking news: man ages after 20 years of destroying his body, if not more. We'll move on.
World's oldest Duncan now.
Jesus. This is from Jake. What is going to be the most debated award this season? Norris, Vezina, Hart, etc. I think the Calder is very much up there for what's going to be the most debated, especially when you have someone like Jason Robertson pushing Kaprizov like he has, and the goalies that are involved in the picture. But I have to say, for me, it's the Norris, because there are going to be quite a few franchises that are going to be very upset that their star defenseman is not involved in the top 3. You look at the fact that it's Hedman in the conversation. You could still even throw Jeff Petrie into the conversation. Cale Makar, Adam Fox. If you wanted to throw Charlie McAvoy in there, I wouldn't disagree. Aaron Ekblad certainly would have been in the conversation had he not been injured. It's tough to say that there's probably a more debated list of players where you have to get it down to just 3 finalists at this stage. Jacob Chychrun as well deserves a massive shout out, leading all defensemen in goals. Even Darnell Nurse, for someone, his defensive ability is still questionable, but as an offensive defenseman, I think you could throw Darnell Nurse in there. I think a lot of LA Kings fans are rubbing it back in everyone's face that Drew Doughty's had a pretty good bounce back season. Dougie Hamilton in Carolina, Shea Theodore in Vegas. You get the point here, and there are still other names we could throw out there. That Norris race, there are going to be a lot of ranting, rambling Reddit posts when the final 3 come out about why it should have been this guy and not this guy.
So obviously, let's not do a full award show thing, because I feel like we could easily go down that rabbit hole.
That's next week.
Your favorite for the Norris at this point?
My favorite for the Norris at this point. Oh, man. It's really tough. It is really, really tough to list off just one person. If I had to go right now, I might go with Adam Fox in New York. That said, oftentimes it does seem to be defensemen that are on playoff teams. That whole conversation about, well, Taylor Hall's the Hart winner, not McDavid, because Edmonton didn't make the playoffs. That's a real thing. So I can't help but think it could even go to probably a Victor Hedman type again. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But Adam Fox leading all defensemen in points, I think would go a long way too. So if I had to vote right now, I think Adam Fox would get my vote.
I'm with you on your first notion that it would have to be a playoff team. And because of that, I think because of the players surrounding him and what he's been able to do, I think Dougie Hamilton, and it could just be that I've seen him play 8 games this year. But I think Dougie Hamilton's my favorite right now.
I mean, that's a good shout too. And I'm obviously very much a fan of Dougie Hamilton, but to my point, just the names we've thrown out, and you still, even if you limit it to just defensemen that are on playoff teams, there are going to be some upset fan bases that their guy wasn't in the top 3. We'll move on. This is from a weirdo on my Discord, All Hail Church of Desk, because that Discord, let me tell you. Baseball question. Are the Red Sox legit? Yes. And when is it time to panic for the Yankees? It has been time to panic for you guys for 12 years because you suck. And you haven't done anything for 12 years despite being the face of baseball. So, yeah, go ahead and panic now because the New York Yankees absolutely suck. And nobody is sympathetic towards you. Deal with it.
So I'm a casual Yankees fan. Awkward time to follow that up.
A little bit,
I'm a casual Yankees fan, and I think the Yankees' problem for this last few years is Aaron Judge can't stay healthy, and Giancarlo Stanton, to a lesser extent, has the same problem. And that's who this team's built around. And obviously, there's been a shift with the additions of Garrett Cole last year, Corey Kluber, where now they're trying to make this a bullpen-focused team. So I don't think the Yankees are screwed. I think they're changing gears and they're becoming a different type of team.
They're also 22 games into a regular season. I mean, it's going to be fine.
100 games left.
Right. It's a full baseball season. There is plenty of time for them to turn it around. I mean, come on. They're not going to finish below Baltimore, for God's sakes. They probably won't finish below Toronto. It's the early, much like what we did with the NHL season. There's no point in necessarily overreacting. Even less of a point in overreacting, considering it's a 162 game, regular standard baseball season. But in the meantime, I will continue to laugh at the Yankees' misfortunes, because why would I not? It's a great time to dance on graves, much like Yankees fans tried to do when the Red Sox, in the aftermath of winning a World Series, took a step back and everyone's like, oh, they're going to be terrible. And now they're very much ahead of the Yankees, and it's a great time. We'll move on to our final question here. And to be honest, it's kind of a 2-in-1 here, Deej. Now, this first one's from Big Boss, who mentions, if you would make any new end-of-season awards, what would they be and who would they be named after? But then Brits also asked a question saying, should the NHL have a most improved player award? Who would it be named after and who would win? So honestly, Brits kind of answered that question for me. I do really like the idea of a most improved player award, even above, say, splitting the defensemen between best defensive and best offensive. I really do like that idea of a most improved award. And it's a tough call, right? It's a real tough call, because who would you name it after? The first name that came to mind for me was the Tim Thomas Award. For someone who's like, he's okay, to, of course, now we're approaching, I think today or yesterday was the 10-year anniversary of the Bruins knocking up Montreal in round 1 en route to the Cup final. Tim Thomas comes to mind as that type of player for me, where it's like, he's okay, to all of a sudden he went on one of the best runs of all time. But then again, when you're talking about the most improved, I mean, Adam Fox deserves, he doesn't, I guess, deserve a shout, technically. Don't know why I threw out Adam Fox's name there. He's a rookie. He's most improved from beyond this season. I mean, granted, he played in the play-in round last year, so he counts Adam Fox, because who knew he was this good? But most improved, Tyson Barrie might honestly deserve a shout. And it's not even so much that Tyson Barrie got any better. It's just more he's on a team that's much better suited for what he does. Jeff Petrie deserves a really good shout for most improved. Mitch Marner deserves a good shout for improving his defensive abilities. Jake Gensel, it's more so he was injured, so I wouldn't necessarily shout him out. You could go with the likes of Kyle Connor and Nikolai Ehlers, although I think they've been this good. It's just people started to notice a little bit more now. And then you get my actual vote for the most improved player, Connor McDavid, because he's still even better than we thought he was, as absurd as that is. So Connor McDavid wins my Tim Thomas Award for most improved player.
So I'm going to call it the Matt Cook Award, and I know that's going to trigger a lot of people.
Including me.
I feel like he turned it around more than anybody else. He went from being an evil person to a very good goal scorer that very rarely committed penalties. And that level of versatility, I think, is what this award should be a great example of. This award is being able to turn your game around and have your style fit in a way that's significantly more healthy for hockey culture and the betterment of the game. I think one of the reasons the NHL wouldn't do this, and I know it's going to seem arbitrary, and I'm sure somebody's going to argue with me on this point, is I feel like having a most improved player award takes away some of the value of the William M. Jennings Trophy. And I know that's a very abstract way of thinking about it, but the Jennings Trophy is the comeback player. Like in general, it's a personal hardship that a player has gone through. But I feel like in a lot of ways,
I'll be a real mom here and say, I do believe you're thinking of the Masterton rather than the Jennings.
I'm so sorry. I am thinking of the Masterton. And the reason I'm thinking of it is because I know Ray Emery won both of them.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's why I was thinking the Jennings Trophy. So that said,
I'll yell at you before the internet does.
Yeah. Hey, looking out. So that said, I don't hate calling it the Matt Cook Award. I think that if there are players in the NHL right now that I think of when you say most improved, there's one player that stands out beyond any other player, I think. And I think a lot of people would overlook this guy, and that's Zach Hyman.
Fair.
He was released by the Panthers. He was going to go be a children's book author. He still is a children's book author. Writes baseball books. Don't understand it, but he does it. And he's a top line scoring forward. He's the grit that gets it done. So a guy like Zach Hyman, I really like the idea of awarding it to him, although that would have been a few years ago.
Now, I will say, I am on board for having a Matt Cook Award. However, it would be for the man on the receiving end of the most satisfying punch of the year. And this would honestly be, in tribute to Evander Kane, one punching Matt Cook back in the day as a rookie when he was with the Thrashers. Great time. And so far, of course, my winner would be Kevin Miller, Rocky-esque punching Tage Thompson. Still one of the most satisfying right hands in the history of all hockey fights. So I'm on board for a Matt Cook Award, but I feel like we'd have it for different reasons, which is okay.
Yeah, fair.
So thank you, everybody, yet again, for sending in your questions. Again, before every show, I put up a thread on Twitter, on the Discord, and on Patreon as well, so that you can get your questions in there. And we thank you very much for taking part. With that said, we are going to move on to our general hockey talk segment. Indeed, we have some very interesting bits of news here after, after a very, very slow and short segment on the last episode. We have some interesting news items here, and we are going to kick things off with the NHL making more and more money. Because much like they got into the wrestling business back in the late 80s, Ted Turner and Turner Sports are getting into the hockey business, as Turner Sports have picked up the secondary broadcast package alongside, of course, ESPN taking the main coverage for the NHL. Now, it looked as though NBC was going to stick around and pick up the secondary package after losing the primary. They don't. They drop out, and really within a matter of hours, it went from even Bob McKenzie saying, well, Fox is probably the favorite, to it being Turner Sports. Now, the NBC's done after a 15-year partnership. And before we move on to the rest of this story, Deej, I want your opinion, because I seem to be in the minority where I don't think NBC was all that bad in terms of their presentation. Like, I get it. You had Mike Milbury on way too many panels and stuff like that. But for the most part,
I was about to raise the same issue.
Like, okay, aside from Mike Milbury, what are the complaints about NBC that I guess bothered maybe some of the masses, but didn't bother me? And nothing really comes to mind in terms of issues aside from the fact of, hey, they brought in Mike Milbury. And I guess if you want to say, too many Bruins games, too many Rangers games, too many Hawks games, I get that too. But obviously I understand the business behind it. But Deej, now that NBC is out of the hockey business for the first time since the ending of the 2005 lockout, I guess your thoughts on the end of an era before we get to talking more about Turner.
I didn't mind NBC's coverage. Obviously, I wish something would have happened overall where ESPN was able to get all the deal, because I know ESPN is very forward-thinking with their streaming, but I don't mind Turner being there. And I watch a lot of the hockey guy on YouTube, Shannon. Anybody that's watched enough hockey videos on YouTube will shove some Shannon right in your face. He brought up a fantastic point about this Turner thing that I want your take on. Okay. Tougies take.
Hey.
How great is this for the AEW?
You know what's funny is that was one of the first things I thought of as a wrestling fan too, where TNT Turner doing a phenomenal job of getting my attention because I've talked about it. Mainly, I think it was on the bonus show a couple months ago, but I had talked about it. As someone who can't really morally justify supporting the WWE anymore, Turner's done a great job providing, the most money-backed alternative in the form of AEW. And now you have NBC losing hockey, which of course they're very much in bed with the WWE. Now they end up losing the hockey coverage, which also goes to Turner. So Turner is doing a phenomenal job appealing to people like me as a wrestling fan and as a hockey fan. And I know Shannon's also a wrestling fan as well. And again, very much, a lot of admiration for Shannon here, even though I don't get to watch his content as much as I used to. But for someone like him, for someone like me, granted, he's up in Canada, not sure what the Turner situation is there. But for someone like me, Turner's knocking it out of the park right now. So, yeah, very, very excited to have my one-stop shop of wrestling and hockey-related content. At least, granted, ESPN still holding the primary broadcasting rights, but you get the point. That was actually something I was going to bring up. So, fair point getting to that. But, unless you had anything else left to add about NBC, like I said, I really didn't have an issue with it outside of, Mike Milbury and Pierre Maguire are freaking weirdos. That's about it. Mike, feel free to come on the show, though. We'd love to talk. I will say. I say that with love because as a Bruins fan, it was one of the staples of my childhood. It's something that I think every Bruins fan, deep down, no matter what you actually think about Mike, there's always that soft spot because he personifies Boston. He beat a man with his own shoe. And that could not speak to the bravado, to the ego of Boston sports fans anymore than the fact that a Bruin went in. That's why there's this toxic fan base, as people describe it, in terms of, they're cheap and dirty. People older than me and the people in my generation, we grew up listening about how Mike Milbury beat a man with his own shoe. Of course, people want to see Milan Lucic truck Ryan Miller and Brad Marchand low bridge people and slew foot them. It's a part of the culture. Not saying it's right.
Throw the tea in the ocean.
There you go. And Mike, in his outdated takes, he was there back then. He beat up a redcoat with his own shoe. It's true. There's footage. Look it up. Infowars.com.
So I will say
oh god,
one more thing on this, and it kind of echoes what you just said. How Turner does with this is going to depend very much on their panel of analysts. And if I'm Ted Turner, who is still alive before I get fact checked on that.
Yes.
If I'm Ted Turner at this point, my first question, how much money does Doc Emmerich want? I don't care how retired you are, you have a number.
That's true. Now, I'll say this, because we are going to talk about some of the things in relations to the broadcast. I am going to be very intrigued to see if they decide to kind of pull an NBC and have, I'm sure they'll have their go-to options, right? And it's one of those things that was kind of, I think, discussed, right? Especially for Turner. You know that Tuesday and Thursday are basketball days. Wednesday on, TNT is a wrestling night. So I'm really intrigued to see what night they kind of, lay claim to. I think a lot of that depends on what ESPN is doing as well. But in terms of the voice of it, if you can't get Doc Emmerich out of retirement and ESPN doesn't pick him up, I think it would be a shame to not have Gary Thorne return to the hockey world, especially now that he's not with the Baltimore Orioles anymore. It would be a huge, huge misservice to this new audience that you're appealing to not have one of the best voices in the sports history calling games once more on either Turner related channels or ESPN. So if it can't be, granted, I think I'd still prefer Gary Thorne over Doc Emmerich. I love Doc Emmerich. I will say, I do think he might be a little bit too far gone in terms of maybe it was the right time for him to walk off into the sunset, because there were a lot of people who mentioned over, the end of last season, of course, that, I think people were starting to notice a little bit more some of the mistakes that were being made and questioning where Doc was at this stage. Because, again, this is a guy who has been doing that. In terms of broadcasting, 40, 50 years? The man's 74 years old. So, but at the end of the day, I do still love one Doc Emmerich. Getting to the other parts of this, though. The Turner deal, 7 years, $225 million a season for the league. There may be something related to HBO Max. It doesn't appear to be official, but could be something that happens down the road. And from the looks of it then, in terms of the 7 Stanley, it says 4 of the next 7 Stanley Cups on ESPN, 3 on Turner. So I'm not quite sure what that split will be, I guess, in terms of, would it be like an NBC, NBCSN thing where it's like, okay, Turner, broadcasting gets games 3, 4, 6, and ESPN, would get the rights to 1, 2, 5, and 7. Who knows there? The Winter Classic won't be going anywhere. It looks like that'll belong to Turner as well, which is tremendous. And then you talk about just what this means for the NHL. This gets them gets them at this stage $645 million on average per season, which is up from the $300 million that they were making. So they more than doubled their rights fees at this stage, which is absolutely massive for the league and just really goes to show, obviously, the value that these properties still have to companies like this. So all in all, it's tremendous news for the NHL. And for as much damage as I think they took due to COVID, this is a phenomenal way for them to bounce back. Because you're talking now about a league that brings in, obviously, it's not NBA or NFL or even baseball type numbers. But between the Rogers deal in Canada, between what they're doing now, this is, they're bringing in over $1 billion a year in TV rights fees. That is, it's absolutely incredible for the health of this league. And the concerns I know that people had of, will there be another lockout? What about this? What about that? This helps this league stay on track in terms of, the cap ceiling is going to be stagnant because of COVID. Not necessarily at this stage, especially to Seattle entering the league. So, it's exciting times to be a hockey fan here. For the NHL, now with ESPN and Turner, it's a really good situation for them. But I will say this, Deej, to I guess wrap this up. If you have any other thoughts, I guess, on the deal itself, let me know. But then we have the big question over what they do with the NBA and how they're going to do things with the NHL. So should we get into that, or do you have anything else to add?
No, I don't think I have anything else to add other than if you can't get those guys out of retirement, you throw the boat at Catherine Tappan, Kevin Weeks, and Patrick Sharp, because they're the next generation. They're doing a great job.
Honestly, I don't disagree with that whatsoever in terms of, hey, guess what? People who were with NBC could still be very valuable to Turner. That does bring me to the question, though, that I had. And it was something I was immediately asked on stream last night, to no surprise. In terms of an NBA-style panel, who are the people to bring in? Now, for those who don't know what I mean, allow me to say Shaq and Charles Barkley. That is what we're talking about. If there is an NHL-style panel, and I'll shout out Kenny as well, but if there's an NBA-style panel with someone like Shaq and Charles Barkley going head-to-head here, who would those perfect personalities be for hockey? And it's a really tough question because, as we all know, personality has often been suppressed in the NHL. It's not really a part of the culture. But when you look at someone like Shaq, one of the best of all time, numerous championships, and you have Charles Barkley, also a Hall of Fame caliber player, didn't happen to win. Can you perfectly replicate that dynamic with players who have that, track record of success, but also have the personality? And it's a really tough thing, and to answer for hockey, because as well, you don't want to go back to like the 60s or the 70s. Like at the very latest, you'd be looking at like late 80s or throughout the 90s, into the 2000s, of course, with someone like Shaq, and Charles Barkley retired pretty early on in the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Who would be those personalities? And I don't know I don't know if they necessarily exist, because the players that came to mind for me, who I think would be perfect, but they're both still active players, you get Brad Marchand and PK Subban on that panel, that would be incredible. But again, they're both active players. I don't know the players that have those type of personalities where it would be that banter back and forth that really makes that show what it is. Does anybody come to mind for you, Deej, in terms of who that would be? Especially, I guess, that has, I'll say, the platform and the accolades to kind of back up, the need and warrants their appearance on that particular show, because that's apparently a part of the plan, is for them to kind of have that similar presentation like they do with the NBA.
I think you're gonna kick yourself when you see how obvious this answer is. The two guys you bring in for that panel are Ryan Whitney and Paul Bissonnette.
Now, see, that was mentioned a lot. And I do think that would be an incredible get for them. I just don't know how realistic it is. But true. I mean, I can't disagree. Like, if you want to appeal right now to hockey culture on the internet, those are absolutely the two to bring on. Is it a perfect fit? I don't know. But I agree that would be probably the most obvious shout at this stage. But aside from that, it does get tough, doesn't it? Just due to the whole, I don't want to say lack of personality, because player personality is there.
Everyone's so nice.
But yeah, right? Like, they're
just all too nice. Like Patrick Sharp, too nice. Kevin Weeks, too nice. Like, you need the hot takes. You need the Skip and Shannon feud. You need Charles Barkley just saying whatever he's thinking about. You need that. And it's really difficult to get that in the NHL.
Yeah, and I mean, you think of it too, and it's just like the rivalry that Shaq and Charles had in their playing days too factors in, I would say, to, and granted, it's not the most historic head-to-head in the world, but there was at least something there, and it's that relationship that allows Shaq and Charles to do what they do. I just don't know who that perfect fit is for the NHL, where it's that thought of, they can just sit there and bust each other's balls the whole time, and it'll get you thousands, if not millions, of views and YouTube compilations.
I was just thinking of random pairings. So let's take the nicest guy in hockey, EJ Radick, and let's pair him with Sean Avery. Just Sean Avery, EJ Radick. That's our Skip and Shannon.
Fair. I think that's a pretty good shout in terms of. I mean, I don't know. You could go with that, right? Like, instead of it being two goofs, you could essentially have the straight man and someone like Sean Avery to just say whatever the hell he wants to say or whatever's on his mind and curse out people while riding in bike lanes in New York City or whatever the hell he's doing. That always seems to pop up every once in a while.
Yeah, right.
So I'm intrigued to see who they go with, because I do think there are good options out there. But it does speak to that issue of, the NHL still needs to allow players to continue to express themselves. And when you're talking about that bygone era, and players now of the past, like, I don't disagree that there would be players to use, but who really has that incredible personality that would especially appeal to the American audience? Because, someone mentioned someone like Doug Gilmour, who has personality, but what kind of ties does Doug Gilmour have to the American hockey scene? Like, nothing. Like, you think of him as a member of the Calgary Flames or the Toronto Maple Leafs, like, he'd be much better suited for, a Sportsnet, a TSN, a CBC, whatever. So, I don't know. I'm intrigued to see who they come up with, but you definitely have the Chicklets option as the one that's probably at the forefront at this stage.
Yeah, and I want to cap this off by saying I don't think the Chicklets option is that unrealistic. We are talking about a network that pays AEW.
I mean, there's a lot of money to throw around. That's fair enough.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it plays out. It would certainly be interesting. I can't deny that. Nothing like a TNT Hockey Night brought to you by Pink Whitney. Coming soon to a station near you. It could very well happen. We'll move on here to one of our other topics. That is that Andrew Shaw has retired at age 29 due to concussion concerns. Now, first and foremost, before we get into some of the more contentious points, I think is how I'll label it, it's a sad story overall. A 29-year-old player having to retire due to concussion issues. It's an incredibly sad story. He's doing what's best for him and his young family. I believe he has 2 kids. So good on him to, and whether or not the decision was out of his hands or not, good on him to be able to, realize what he has to do for the sake of his future. Because as we know, and we've had people like Ryan Kessler talk about it, the things professional athletes, and in this specific instance, hockey players, are willing to do, and the damage that they're willing to put themselves through, knowing that it's going to have long-term effects. A lot of players, I think, in Shaw's situation, if he could have been medically cleared, if they left it up to him, I'm sure he'd continue to play. So at the very least, it is nice to see common sense, I guess, prevail, and someone to not risk even more potential long-term damage to themselves. And for Andrew Shaw, what more do you have to play for? You're a 2-time Stanley Cup champion, not going to be a Hockey Hall of Famer. What more do you have to play for? You've already accomplished, I'd say, just about everything that you could look to accomplish. But, DeJ, anything else I'd say on the positive side to add before we have to talk about what his career was? Because I don't think it's fair to necessarily whitewash a career in saying, oh, he's retired now, so hey, what a guy, because there are some things to talk about.
Well, here, I want to talk about why those bad things are good things. So let's take a look at this, right? Obviously, when you mention Andrew Shaw, you can't not think of the homophobic slur suspension.
I was going to bring that up, yes. So
here's what I want to say about Andrew Shaw. Andrew Shaw, when this happened, he was 24.
Yeah.
24-year-old kid uses a slur, does not realize the gravity of his statement. Then goes on, when he's on Montreal, volunteers to be the team's You Can Play captain. Says, I've learned enough. Starts warming up every game with pride tape. He does this for the next 3 years, give or take. Retires due to concussions. Shaw has a Memorial Cup. He has 2 Stanley Cups. He was on these Chicago teams. There is a path. If Andrew Shaw keeps up the work, if he understands the position he put himself in and continues with his contributions to the You Can Play program and showing acceptance and showing that sometimes people can change and they don't understand the gravity of their actions. If he can keep up this work, keep spreading inclusiveness in hockey, I think there's a path to the Hockey Hall of Fame for Andrew Shaw. And that's a weighty thing to put on a 29-year-old, but I think it's there for him if he wants it.
Fair. And maybe he doesn't necessarily make it in as a player, but maybe, I don't know if the builder category would make sense. But I did want to bring that up because I'll say this. When talking about an incident like this, what do you always ask for? You ask for the receipts. I'll mention, and obviously I know you're well aware of this as well, you look at someone like Kyle Larson, which is a name that for some people it's going to be like, who the hell is that? Or that sounds kind of familiar. And again, Kyle Larson was the NASCAR driver that in the early stages of the COVID pandemic was on a live stream and dropped the N-word. And he was out. He was done. That was it. He lost his sponsorships. He lost his drive. He lost his ride in NASCAR. You're done. But then in those following months, what did he do? It wasn't a matter of doubling down. It was, I'm going to stay out of the spotlight and genuinely try to make amends. And that's what he did, working with charitable organizations. The bottom line is that by the time that for this season he gets his ride back, granted, not many sponsors are touching him this year, But, a very talented guy, showed the receipts, gets back into the, into the good graces, and I think rightfully so, right? It's one of those things, show the receipts if if that happens. I won't even say if that mistake happens, because I get the viewpoint of, well, that word's clearly in your vocabulary, you can't call it a mistake. And I get that. I agree with DeJ in that I think Andrew Shaw has the receipts to show that from that incident, I don't necessarily think he deserves criticism in the modern day for that incident. Based off of what I've seen, if there are other incidents, I will gladly reassess my position or my stance on this. But then you get into the complicated legacy that he has due to his play style. And for a lot of people, calling it playing on the edge is letting him off the hook. There are a ton of questionable hits, headshots, slew foots. He nearly destroyed Connor McDavid's knee in his first season or two with the slew foot. And I'm well aware, especially for those of you that are watching this on YouTube and have watched what I do and know that when this webcam's on, I have a Bruins banner to my right. And, well, what about Brad Marchand? We're not talking about Brad Marchand. We're not talking about, Brad Marchand's horrific track record of, quote unquote, playing on the edge, if not going over the line, much like Andrew Shaw did. There's a reason why he's retiring at age 29. It's because of the play style. And like I said, I use the term whitewashing to say, what a guy, what a career, best of luck moving forward, because he's retired now. A lot of people aren't so quick to forget his style of play, and I certainly feel as though calling him a dirty player is justified, and I won't blame someone for, using that terminology. Like I said, I wish the guy the best in terms of his health moving forward. Hope he can live a happy and healthy life with his family now. Again, he's 29 years old. He's probably not even reached, if we're going off of average life expectancy, the guy hasn't even reached, the second stage, the second half of his life at this stage. But there is a reason as to why a lot of people are under the viewpoint of saying good riddance. Like I said, there's a reason why he's retiring at age 29. It's the style that he played. The style that he played made him an incredibly successful hockey player. Like DeJ said, a Memorial Cup, a two-time Cup champion. Andrew Shaw's not Andrew Shaw unless he plays that style. Did he go overboard at certain points? Yeah. And there's a suspension track record to show that. But, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't really, kind of mention the other side to the discussion that needs to be had surrounding Andrew Shaw. DeJ, anything else to add here before a couple of other points just in relation to the story?
No, I think we covered it all. I'm glad you brought up the show your receipts point.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, I think, all anybody really asks for in that situation, right? I think that's all that can really be asked at this stage, right? You have to show that willingness of, hey, I know I screwed up, and I want to make amends for that. But again, as mentioned with Andrew Shaw, and for most players, and I'll bring up Brad Marchand again. Brad Marchand, fantastic hockey player. But those talents in being a phenomenal two-way player or goal scorer, you're also always going to have the flip side of that conversation, the incredibly dirty play and the reputation that he has because of it. Same thing with Shaw. Now, I will say, though, too, this was something that was pointed out. You have a lot of players from those three Hawks Cup-winning teams, at least that took part in at least one of them, that ended up retiring early and had their bodies kind of break down on them sooner rather than later. Dave Bolin, Marian Hossa, Brent Seabrook, Brian Bickle. Granted, that was due to an entirely different reason, and I will say we wish Brian Bickle the best. Haven't really heard an update on the guy in a while. I hope he's doing well. Corey Crawford this year. Dustin Byfuglien, whether or not that was, an issue with his body breaking down or just not wanting to play. Andrew Ladd as well. It goes to show the price that you pay to win a cup, if not 3, that some of these guys were involved with. Shaw obviously involved with 2 of them, where, my God, there's a reason why those Hawks teams were so good, and it's because you can absolutely say that every single member of that team literally gave it their all. And now we see the aftermath here, 8 years removed. I mean, granted, from the 2 that Shaw was a part of, it's pretty staggering. And obviously, Andrew Shaw won't be the last guy to retire early due to injuries. And I think that it's going to be a more common occurrence. Indeed, we've seen it in the NFL, right, with the likes of Calvin Johnson. That was probably the most notable one, to have Calvin Johnson walk away where he did, to have Luke Kuechly of the Carolina Panthers walk away as well. I believe at age 29, it might have actually been 28. Now he's with the Panthers as a scout. You're going to continue to see a lot of these players as we continue to learn more and more, continue to assess the risk and say, well, what's worth it for me at this stage? And you talk about someone right now, it's not just concussion issues. You talk about, say, Oscar Klefbom in Edmonton with his shoulder issues, where there was an article out on Sportsnet where it was essentially referred to, like, you talk about someone in his situation where, man, if you blow out that shoulder one more time, you're going to have trouble playing with your kids. And that's something Ryan Kessler's talked about with his back issues. Just how difficult it is for some of these guys to just be able to live. I think Zenon Konopka was involved in a documentary as well, where it's like, okay, cool, I play with my kids, but then afterwards, what do I have to do? I go sit in an ice bath for 2 hours because I'm in miserable pain here. It's definitely a part of a larger conversation. I think, again, we will continue to see some of these guys retire before age 30, just because, you factor in when they start playing hockey, that's a lot of wear and tear. And it really goes to show just how special someone like a Patrick Marleau, a Zdeno Chara, that these guys happen to be, where, if anything, it's just more a matter of luck and good circumstance that these guys have been able to play as much as they have, to have not had their bodies break down. And it makes you wonder, too. I thought about this for someone like Zdeno Chara. What's that guy going to look like in his 60s? Is that eventually going to catch up to him at this stage? You just don't really know. So, DeJ, any other talking points there, or did we hit it all?
No, I think you hit it all. I mean, I know Vladimir Tarasenko's wife even said just as much with his shoulder issues, that he's like one hit away from never being able to play again. So it's obviously, as we learn more and more, not everybody's body can hold up the same way. It comes down to genetics at some point. Yeah.
No, I agree with that for sure. We'll get into another unfortunate topic of conversation here as well. This came out, I was actually informed of this last night and had no idea. There are a bunch of Toronto Maple Leafs veterans, led by Jason Spezza, that quietly tried to do this, but obviously, it found its way into the media. That being that they have pooled their money together to help support members of the Toronto Marlies in the AHL. Now, due to the pandemic, many endured, a long off season without seeing a check. And now some of them, if not all of them, are seeing their pay essentially cut in half, which, again, you talk about the average AHLer, there's not a whole lot of money there. You put it into relative terms, people will be like, oh, well, they make more than if they were doing this. It's like, okay, but they're professional hockey players. You got to look at the circumstances for what they are and not compare. It's just one of those things, DH, where does it look great for Jason Spezza? Yes, and the players that were involved. Just obviously, they weren't doing it for the good publicity. They're doing it because they are very sound people with, obviously, commendable morals. But we've seen this not just in the sport of hockey, right? When it comes down to, hey, common logic doesn't always prevail. Should Jason Spezza and company have to be doing this to help support these guys? No. There's very obviously money that could be coming down from the proper channels that aren't. So I do commend the likes of Jason Spezza for doing something like this. But at the end of the day, I do think it's a part of a greater conversation on the merits of capitalism And, that's a whole conversation we could get into about how absurd this is, that, you have professional hockey players here in the circumstance taking a 50% pay cut just because the Toronto Marlies can't afford, apparently, to pay their players. The Marlies, who of course are owned by Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, the same people who own the Toronto Maple Leafs. So essentially, MLSE can't afford to pay the Marlies their salary, apparently. Otherwise, the wheels will just stop turning. It's complete bullshit. It is. It's complete bullshit. Again, Deej, it's a part of a longer conversation that I don't really want to rant and ramble about. But your thoughts on this story as well, I think we would have been remiss if we didn't bring it up.
Yeah, at least they're getting paid. There's a lot of complicated bullshit here. That's very upsetting. But good on the Leafs bets, especially when these AHL guys aren't getting paid. I think there's such a mental separation between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Toronto Marlies. All these guys are friends, especially with the taxi squad and players coming up and down all year. Like, these guys, you see their financial struggles firsthand. So good on the Leafs bets.
Yeah. So again, that is a part of a longer, I guess you could call it economics-based conversation that I don't really want to, get into right now. We'll try to, again, keep it a little bit light. But another story there where, again, nice to see good people kind of get the spotlight shown on them, even if they didn't necessarily want it, which it's clear that they didn't. And the last talking point here before we get to our quick division run-through, as we always have, is that Patrick Roy is eyeing a return to the NHL, whether as a coach or executive. He signed on with a new agent, Neil Glassberg, who also represents the likes of Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh and John Tortorella as well. He is currently the head coach and GM of the Quebec Ramparts of the QMJHL. And of course, Deej hasn't been a part of the NHL since leaving the Colorado Avalanche. He was head coach and vice president of hockey ops from 2013 to 2016, won the Jack Adams in his first season with the club, and then stepped down from his role in 2016, citing a lack of input in personnel decisions. So a complicated legacy as a coach and executive for Patrick Roy. And you talk about where the Avs were when Roy decided to leave and kind of what that team was doing, because for a moment, again, the year he won the Jack Adams, things were looking pretty good. And then you get into, okay, well, he leaves and things aren't going so well. And what is Joe Sakic doing as a GM? And then obviously since, things have worked out incredibly well for Joe Sakic and the Colorado Avalanche. And any questions that people had, I would say justifiably so at the time, but any questions people had about Joe Sakic have certainly gone to the wayside now. And you look at Patrick Roy and potential landing spots, and this has been pointed out. You look at the teams that do not have a head coach signed up for next season. Vancouver, maybe, Canadian team. Detroit, I don't know how good of a fit that is. Columbus, I don't know what you're going to look for in Columbus getting rid of John Tortorella. Buffalo, well, having Roy work with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen could be nice, but I don't know. Arizona, well, you have a history with NHL greats as your head coach. Wayne Gretzky, obviously, although that was a disaster, as Deke Slayer mentioned in that podcast we recorded with him a while ago. And then, Deej, perhaps the most interesting one, the Montreal Canadiens, looking for a head coach. Your thoughts on a potential landing spot for Patrick Roy, and does silly season happen with him going, as crazy as it would be, to Montreal?
Well, first, I would be remiss to say that when you mention Patrick Roy as a coach, the first thing that comes up in my mind is him trying to fight Bruce Boudreau through the partition.
Yep.
One of my favorite moments in hockey history.
Absolutely.
Very funny now, 8 years in retrospect. especially Bruce Boudreau being on the other end. And that was like at the height of Boudreau's meme worthiness because of the ice cream on whatever they were calling it at the time, whatever the hockey version of Hard Knocks was.
Oh God, yeah, I don't even remember what the hell it was
Road to
called.
the Winter Classic or whatever.
There you go. I will say though, right? Well, you think back to that moment. Just interrupt for a second. You'd think it would have been like John Tortorella on the other side of it, but like you said, for it to be Bruce Boudreau of all people, one of the most bizarre moments in NHL history.
Yeah. So I don't hate Columbus as an option. Obviously, they have Elvis, who's a very good goaltender. But I don't think Waugh is going to show up for anywhere other than Montreal at this point. Maybe there's some fits somewhere, but I can't see him going anywhere other than Montreal. And I don't even know if Montreal should get rid of Claude Julien at this point. I find that to be very confusing.
He's already gone.
He is already gone, isn't he?
I think you mean Descharmes in terms of like the job he's done since.
Yes, that is correct. I forgot that they kind of cleaned house.
Yeah, that they did.
I don't speak enough French, so the news is late.
The news is late. We're still waiting for the translations to come through.
Exactly. So I don't know. I mean, maybe. I guess that makes sense. Patrick Waugh can basically decide where he wants to go at this point, and he seems to be very focused on his legacy. So Montreal makes sense.
You talk about it though, right? Like the potential of a redemption tour for Patrick Waugh in Montreal and the story that could be. It's one of the most historically, I'd say, relevant departures and controversial departures of a player from a championship caliber team is the way Patrick Waugh left Montreal. And I'm not saying that it wouldn't be a train wreck. I think more people are on the side that it could be. But the idea that Patrick Waugh comes back and inherits a pretty young and exciting core that now, of course, includes the likes of Cole Caulfield and Romanoff and Caden Primo in goal. If there was any situation where Patrick Waugh could succeed, it probably would be Montreal. And then again, just for that historical importance of what that would mean for him to get that bit of redemption, I am begging for this to happen, not just because I think it could blow up in Montreal's face, but genuinely, I think it could be an unbelievable story if it were to work out, even though I'd be actively rooting against it to work out. But, you know, you can't deny certain things, right? Like you just have to call a spade, and it would be a very interesting story and one of the most intriguing narratives heading into next season if it were to happen.
Yeah. I mean, I'm all for it. So I don't know. I quickly looked up to see if Bergevin and Waugh were ever teammates at any point, and they were not, but that would have been a cool story. So I mean, if Waugh's coming back, it's for Montreal. I think that's my final statement on it. I can't really see him going anywhere else.
Fair enough. So with that then, if you're good to go, shall we move in to our division breakdown to kind of wrap up this show over the next little bit here? Still plenty of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with the West.
The lovely Honda West, as we always do. Of course, Vegas, Colorado, and Minnesota have all clinched for the Vegas Golden Knights. Marc-Andre Fleury continues to just have an unbelievable season, easily one of the best seasons ever for a goaltender at his age. And Vegas, winning 9 of their last 10, have set a franchise record for wins in a row with 9 consecutive wins. So this juggernaut of a team, right now 4 points ahead of Colorado with the game at hand. We'll see if that sticks, not necessarily a guarantee, but so far, yeah, things are looking pretty good for the Vegas Golden Knights as they have all season long. I'll say this for Colorado as well, again, clinching at this stage. I mean, they've still won 7 of their last 10. They've lost 2 in a row. And then Minnesota clinching. They've won 7 in a row, 8 of their last 10. And a stat from this weekend, though, that makes this interesting is that they hadn't outshot an opponent since March 14th, but they're 12-5-3 in that time. So the Wild right now have been a team that have just been able to, at the end of the day, get results. And that's what's important. The stat line does not matter. The only thing that matters, of course, is the goal total at the end of the day. And this is huge for Minnesota. And I mean, we've talked about it a ton, DeJ. You know, ultimately, you have a very tough matchup in round 1, no matter what. I think it's understated. They're just a point back of Colorado, the Avs with a game at hand. So I will mention that. But it's been an incredible season for them. I don't think anyone expected this necessarily. It would be nice for the sake of that franchise if they were at the point where you could get out of the first round, because that was their reputation for a long time was, okay, cool, they'll make it, but they'll lose in the first round. I don't know if I necessarily see that being any different because, again, it's Colorado or Vegas in round 1. But all in all, it's been a phenomenal season for the Minnesota Wild. Your thoughts on either of the 3 big teams at this stage, if there was anything you wanted to add?
Well, when you bring up the Wild and them clinching a playoff berth, I want to refer to what I said about Chicago, where you need 2 star forwards, top 10 defensemen, elite level goaltending. They are getting the elite goaltending from Kaapo Kähkönen and Cam Talbot this year. So the goaltending is not an issue. The issue is when you get to the star forwards and the star defensemen. I don't think Kirill Kaprizov can beat Vegas or Colorado. And I think that's the issue.
We had that conversation, right, in regards to the Calder, and I'm sure it'll come up in the next episode, why I still think, Kaprizov is the guy to end up winning the Calder is because this Minnesota team does not make the playoffs without him. Like you just kind of alluded towards, do they have enough in addition to Kaprizov kind of dragging that team? Do they have enough? And we are talking about a team that, as you pointed out, tried to run Nick Bjugstad and Kyle Rau on their fourth line. So that kind of does speak to maybe some depth issues where, look, I think Minnesota is going to be a legitimate threat here, especially if they lock down Kaprizov now moving forward. But in the short term here, do they have enough? On paper, it doesn't look like it. But still, a phenomenal season for Wild fans. And then we get into the 3 teams at the bottom. Because despite the fact that LA's 6 points back, let's be honest, that's not going to happen. And Anaheim's not going to happen. But we have talked a lot about St. Louis, Arizona, and San Jose. Now, the St. Louis Blues right now are in that 4th spot, 48 points in 46 games. The Arizona Coyotes are just 1 point back at 47, but they've played 3 more games. And then San Jose as well, 5 points back of the Blues with 2 games in hand. We mentioned this before. St. Louis is going to make the playoffs. I don't see a way in which the Blues fail to make the playoffs here. I just don't. We talked about it. Arizona, you just don't have the depth to pull this off. You don't. I don't see, and especially too now at this stage. I mean, yeah, 1 point back, but 3 games in hand for the Blues. I just don't see it. And San Jose at this stage as well, their problems are well documented. But you look at this at this stage, between these 3 teams, they are a combined 4-22-2 in their last 28 games. At least that was the stat at the time. With the Sharks being 0-6-1 in their last 7. The Coyotes are 1-7-0 in their last 8. And the Blues at 3-9-1. We have talked about it all year long. It just seems like it's one of these spots, and it's not the only division where this is happening. Nobody seems to want that 4th spot. Nobody seems to want it. And maybe it's because, again, it's Colorado over Vegas in round 1, and it's probably going to go badly for you. It would be more detrimental to the Blues to miss out. But again, the good thing is, I don't think they will. But I don't know. Like, there are a lot of Blues fans who are throwing in the towel here at this stage. I mean, I have to say, I still think, and it's probably because of 2019 and what happened. But as a Bruins fan, I can't look at the Blues and just be like, nope, they're screwed. Like, they're going to make it. And they have a chance to maybe pull something off with that roster. I get why some people aren't the most confident, but they have a chance.
They do have a chance. I want to point out that the St. Louis Blues have, of their, what are we at? 10 remaining games. 5 of them are against the Minnesota Wild.
Oof.
Arizona has 1 remaining game against Vegas, and all of their other remaining games are against San Jose and Los Angeles. So if we're looking at strength of schedule, there is a very small window for the Coyotes here. So I don't know. It's like you said, nobody wants the spot, and it's crazy. You look at Arizona, they went 2-8-0 over their last 10. That's crazy. I don't understand it. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in this division. This division, frankly, upsets me as a hockey fan.
Oh, boy. So, again, with that, not too much else to talk about. I mean, I will shout out the LA Kings. They have Quentin Byfield on the taxi squad. We might see him make his NHL debut, which would be quite nice. And for the Anaheim Ducks as well, I mean, I hate to say it for Ducks fans, but you're well aware there's not really too much positive to talk about. Jakob Silverberg underwent successful hip surgery. He's out for 4 to 6 months. Again, though, with hockey players, that might just be one of the things where he's been hurt for a while and said, why the hell am I bothering to continue to play? I'm just going to go get this surgery and be ready to go for the future. So, yeah, not too much positive going on with Anaheim. Although I will mention, of course, with Arizona, we brought him up earlier in terms of the Norris race. But for Mr. Chychrun, taking the defensive scoring lead in terms of goals with 14 on the season, I got to be honest, I'm still very upset because I remember when he was falling down the draft board and my thought was, please God, let him fall to the Bruins. Please God, let him fall to the Bruins. And ultimately he didn't. But yeah, no, Jakob Chychrun is a very, very solid player. The pride of Boca Raton, Florida, who, yeah, at the end of the day,
more than just a place to die. Boca Raton, Florida, more than just a place to die. His dad is actually a member of the Panthers announcing team. He's one of the intermission guys. Fun fact.
Oh yeah, good old. God, what the hell is his dad's name? I can't remember at this stage.
I think it's
Jeff.
I think it's John Chychrun.
Is it Jeff or John?
Chychrun, that's what
Jeff Chychrun, I'm pretty sure.
It's Jeff. It is Jeff.
I will say, though, in relation to that, the Bruins did take Charlie McAvoy instead of Chychrun, so it would have worked out for them regardless.
Mistake.
Would have worked out for him regardless. Definitely thought it was a mistake at the time, and hey, there you go. That said, again, not too much else going on in the West Division right now. Keep an eye on that. I still say St. Louis is going to make it, mainly because it would be an unmitigated disaster for the Coyotes to make it over them. And like I said, even for the Coyotes, I mean, I have faith in St. Louis that if they were to make the playoffs, that maybe something could happen. But at the end of the day, for Arizona, like, do I have any confidence that they could upset Vegas or Colorado? Absolutely not. In no way do I think that first round upset would happen. I mean, that would be nearly, if not beyond, the level of Columbus upsetting Tampa, in my opinion. That would be one of the biggest first round playoff upsets in NHL history if Arizona were to knock off a Vegas or a Colorado in round one. So you never say never in hockey, though, I suppose is the story here. We'll move on to the Discover Central Division. The Carolina Hurricanes became the first team in that division to clinch a playoff spot at 69 points. Deej, did you know it is a franchise record that has been set, at least since moving to Carolina, excluding the Whalers' history? This is the first time in team history that the Hurricanes have made the playoffs 3 seasons in a row.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
There's just something about
statistically, I wonder how many teams actually have made it over the last 20 years. I mean, Carolina, they've only been in the league. They came in 2001, correct? Or were they in 1999?
97 is when they moved from Hartford.
Wow, I'm completely off. I wonder how many teams in the last 24 years have actually made it 3 times in a row. That would be interesting to me.
Fair. I will say, I think the reason as to why it's a bit surprising, though, would be obviously that they have a Stanley Cup win in that time. And maybe that does kind of skew the opinion, is when you think like, oh, well, they won a cup. I'm sure there's been more sustained success than that. But honestly, there hasn't been. And I think that's a big part of the reason as to, why. I mean, as if he wasn't before winning that previously, mentioned Stanley Cup with Carolina, but it is a big part of the reason as to why Rod Brind'Amour is so beloved. But there was something in a Reddit thread that I noticed when reading about this that caught my attention that I was not aware of. Now, Rod Brind'Amour is not currently in the Hockey Hall of Fame, which you could very much argue he deserves to be. I mean, certainly as a player, and he's going to start making his argument as a coach sooner rather than later. But according apparently to Rod Brind'Amour himself, he doesn't think that he'll ever make the Hockey Hall of Fame. And he's alluded towards it being for political reasons. And DeJ, I don't know if you were aware of this, and it might not be the most responsible thing to bring up. But apparently, there are rumors that the reason as to why Rod Brind'Amour is not in the Hockey Hall of Fame is because when he was a member of the Philadelphia Flyers, it is alleged that Eric Lindros slept with his wife, and Rod Brind'Amour beat the hell out of him in the locker room and subsequently was traded from Philadelphia. I don't know if that's true or not, but that is the first I had ever heard of those allegations, and it blew my mind.
Well, this isn't the first time that there have been allegations of this nature in the Philadelphia locker room. So, Philly, you got a culture problem. Big culture problem, Philly. That's very interesting to me. Have not heard that before.
I will say, I don't know the legitimacy of it because I feel like that allegation's thrown around a lot. Like, that's one of perhaps the old wives' tales that was thrown around in Boston in regards to Tyler Sagan being traded. And that's one of the things that, like I said, gets thrown around a lot, that maybe Tyler Sagan slept with somebody's wife on the team. Who knows for sure? I will say this, though. There was an interview as well with Canes owner Tom Dundon, formerly of a failing football league, who mentioned that Rod Brind'Amour will be the coach of the team the next season. Quoted, "I've never really had a problem keeping good people. We find a way. He's the best. I have no interest in owning the team if Rod Brind'Amour isn't the head coach." So you talk about situations amongst NHL teams where, in terms of a power dynamic with how much stroke a coach happens to have, talk about Patrick Waugh leaving Colorado for not having enough input on the direction of the team. Essentially it feels like Rod Brind'Amour is the man when it comes to that team. And it's a good sign because Tom Dundon doesn't seem like the type of owner to be hands-off. But, and again, I'm sure the wording and the terminology here is just tremendous considering we talked about an alleged story involving cheating. At the end of the day, an owner allowing Rod Brind'Amour and Dom Waddell to do what they do seems like a recipe for success in my books. And the Carolina Hurricanes are scary now, and it looks like they're going to continue to be scary moving forward.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, Rod Brind'Amour is what Roberto Luongo is to the Florida Panthers. Rod Brind'Amour is to the Carolina Hurricanes. He was their captain when they won the cup. He's their mascot. He's their coach now. I'm sure he spent some time literally as their mascot. Like he may have been Hamilton at some point. Or Stormy. They have 2 mascots. One of them's a real pig. Let me know in the comments which one's the real pig.
I mean, it better be Hamilton. With a name that. It better be Hamilton.
I mean, you got a guy that's liked by the fans. He's bringing your team success. How much more can you ask for, Tom?
Come on, Tom. That's it. We'll move on to the Florida Panthers, who can clinch a playoff spot tonight, if I'm not mistaken. Deej, the one person I wanted to mention here in particular, because I don't feel like we've talked about him enough. He has been mentioned, especially in the aftermath of the Aaron Ekblad injury. But Mackenzie Weegar would be on pace for 50 points as a defenseman if it was an 82-game season, and he's done so with apparently very little power play time. So a shout-out to Mackenzie Weegar. Your thoughts on the Florida Panthers in between our last show and now?
Yeah, I mean, they could have clinched last night. They ran into an extremely hot UC Saros. Chris Drieger got injured in the middle of the game, so Bobrovsky had to step in the middle of the game. Does that mean Bob starts tonight? Or, and I know you at home are waiting for this, could we see Spencer Knight 2, the sequel? It's quite possible. I haven't checked James and Olive's Twitter to see who's warming up, who's in what crease tonight. But Drieger did get injured last night. We ran into an extremely hot UC Saros, prevented us from clinching. So really, all we need is for Nashville to lose one game and we clinch. It would be an absolute miracle for the Panthers not to make the playoffs at this point. And by all statistical measures, the remaining games are just a race between Tampa and Florida to see who has home field advantage in the battle of the Florida men.
In the Florida Bowl. I will say for the Panthers, though, I can't help but think that when it comes to the goaltending situation, Bob's your goalie. And maybe even your uncle. Who's to say? Never know. You mentioned Tampa as well, which not too many notes for them at this stage. But like you said, it's still very much a three-horse race between the Canes, Panthers, and Tampa, just to see what the seeding is ultimately going to be in the first round. You get to talking, though. What was that?
There's some breaking Panthers news that it's not that big, but I'll mention it when you finish your point.
It's got to be Spencer Knight, isn't it? Is it?
It's not, unfortunately.
What is it? You might as well say it now so we can move on from the Panthers.
So Grigory Denisenko, who you may remember from dominating your team at the World Juniors, if you're not from Russia, and one Alexei Heponiemi, have both been promoted to the active roster from the taxi squad. So it looks like we may be seeing Barkov with some new line mates tonight after the Vetrano-Gusev experiment did not work very well.
I mean, I could have told you as a Bruins fan that first line of Frankie Vetrano probably wasn't a very safe bet. But the Panthers getting, I don't know if I'd say much needed reinforcements, but it certainly couldn't hurt at this time. We get into talking, though, about the playoff picture for the fourth seed in the Central. At this stage, ultimately, the Chicago Blackhawks are basically out of it. It's a two-horse race between Nashville and Dallas. Nashville 2 points ahead, but the Stars with 2 games at hand, and it's been the talking point. Is Dallas going to catch them? Dallas had a very interesting week, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But, Deej, at this stage, do you have faith that Nashville can hold on? They've won 6 of their last 10 and 2 in a row. But Dallas has won 7 of their last 10, 2 in a row as well. Does the obvious happen here with the Dallas Stars catching Nashville?
So I will bring up, first of all, the Predators are a very different team with Pecorine in net versus UC Saros. Tonight,
they're a better
Pecorine
team
in net. That said, Saturday, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm going to be watching this Stars-Predators game because if the Predators have a chance in hell, they need to win that game in regulation.
Fair.
Luckily, their final 2 games of the season are against the Hurricanes, who, unless the Lightning have a crazy resurgence, it would appear that the Hurricanes will be in a spot to rest some players for those final 2 games for the Predators. When you look at Dallas's schedule, it is infinitely more difficult. tonight they play the Hurricanes again. On Thursday, they play the Tampa Bay Lightning. Then there's that game against Nashville I mentioned. Then they'll be playing a Panthers team trying to secure home advantage. Then they'll be playing a Lightning team trying to secure home advantage. Then they'll be playing Lightning again before finishing the season against Chicago. So Dallas has a significantly more difficult schedule. That said, and I know if you were from Dallas, we mentioned it briefly last week, this is what's on your mind right now. Tyler Sagan is ready to come back any day now. And that's what this team needs.
Hide your wives.
Say that again?
Hide your wives.
Hide your wives. Tyler Sagan, famous for his specialized line of hockey shot products. So Tyler Sagan, he is going to rejuvenate this team. I want to say this is Dallas's spot to lose, but I look at that strength of schedule and it is worlds apart what Nashville has to go through versus what Dallas has to go through. Chicago, you're a Chicago fan, punch your ticket, go to the golf course. This is not your year. So I don't know. I don't know who takes this. If you would ask me this on Friday, I would have said Dallas, no questions asked. And I don't know what changed. But when I look at that strength of schedule and I see what's going on, I'm nervous if I'm a Nashville fan right now.
I think rightfully so. I'll mention this quickly, too, about Columbus, who are at the bottom of this division. Jonas Korpisalo out for the rest of the year with a lower body injury. Again, probably just an instance of what the hell is the point of even playing at this stage. Columbus is absolutely boned. But there was that topic of conversation in regards to, does Columbus move on from one of their two goaltenders? So who knows? Maybe Korpisalo's played his last game as a Blue Jacket. But then we get into talking about the Detroit Red Wings and, in part, the Dallas Stars. Now, Detroit officially eliminated from playoff contention, but they had a game against Dallas that was absolutely absurd. And anyone, of course, who, odds are, if you know me, it's from the YouTube or Twitch side of things and what I do with EA NHL. There's a term, Deej, that you're well aware of. It's called getting EA'd, which is you outshoot your opponent, you have way more possession time, but you don't score enough goals and you lose. And it looked like Dallas was going to get EA'd as, if I'm not mistaken, it was something like 30 shots to 3 at the end of the second period, and they were down 1-0 at that stage. Dallas did go on to win that game in overtime, but that was an interesting one in and of itself. And then you get into the conversation of what happened as well surrounding Dallas and Detroit, where Detroit at this stage is going to be without Dylan Larkin for the rest of the year after a cross-check from Jamie Benn, who, we talked about Andrew Shaw playing on the edge. We talked about Brad Marchand. I feel like it's a bit lost amongst fans of Eastern Conference teams because Jamie Benn, not so quietly, has a reputation as one of the dirtiest players in the league from fan bases of other Western Conference teams. I mean, feel free to look at whether it be on Twitter or Reddit, the reaction to what Jamie Benn did here. Jamie Benn is quietly, like I said, at least from East Coast fan bases, one of the most, sneakily dirty players in the league, or at least has that reputation, right or wrong. I don't really know who else comes to mind in that way. It seems like more often than not, if someone has the reputation of a dirty player, it's very, very outward and not so, I guess I'd say, ambiguous. It tends to be like a Brad Marchand type of just like, nope, here's his reputation and that's it. And everyone pretty much knows it.
Yeah, I mean, all great brother duos. One guy's the looks, one guy's the muscle. You get the Ben brothers here. You get the middle two stalls in Jordan and Mark. You get Mario and Luigi. One guy's the looks, one guy's the muscle. That's how it works. And obviously, Jordy Ben, the muscle. But Jamie Benn, I don't think he likes the reputation. I don't think he likes the brother archetype he's been assigned. And he may be trying to do something about it.
That was a great A. That was a great A bit of analysis there, buddy. Well done. I'll mention this too because it was a stat that I saw. Dallas Stars, who have appeared in all 46 games this season, there's only 4. Gurianov, Lindell, Alexiak, and Joe Pavelski. So in case you needed a reminder as to why Dallas is in this situation and isn't, locked into a playoff spot already, this season has been an absolute nightmare for them based off of COVID and injuries. It's been a rough time for the Dallas Stars. And similarly for Detroit, all Red Wings who have played in 49 games this season. Deej, care to guess how many? How many players have played in all 49 Red Wings games this season?
It's got to be low, right? It's not more than 6, is it?
2. 2 players have played in all of their games, Philip Hronek and Mark Stahl. So,
holy cow.
In case you were wondering if it was worth for Steve Yzerman to take on the Mark Stahl cap hit for the year, yes, because he is one of the few who has actually been able to stay healthy this year. Again, at the end of the day, not a huge deal for Detroit. Like, this wasn't their year. They're still set up incredibly well for the future. But that is a staggering amount of injuries and issues that those two teams have had this season, really to where it's a miracle. You look at where Detroit is, it's a miracle that Dallas is still even in the conversation given the circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll move on. We've hit the halfway point. We'll move on to the Mass Mutual East Division, featuring the division's best. At one point, they were the league's best. The division's best Pittsburgh Penguins. Currently atop this division. Granted, they have a lower point percentage than Washington, but Pittsburgh sits atop this division, and of course, a big part of the reason as to why is Sidney Crosby. He is now 3rd all-time in point-per-game pace seasons with 16. So again, that's having the amount of seasons where you are at least a point per game 16 times now for Sidney Crosby. You have Gordie Howe at 17, Wayne Gretzky at 19. Deej, will Sidney Crosby catch Wayne Gretzky in this very, I'm not going to go with bizarre stat, but a very particular stat?
I think he definitely catches Gordie Howe. I don't know if I'm ready to say he catches Gretzky yet, because Sidney Crosby has a very to the boards with a guy on your back while you're on your edges playing style that I think will cause him to drop off significantly at some point in the next few years.
Do you think, I was going to say, we always talk about, for the most part, when a player has it and then they very suddenly don't. Some players get away with it, like Zdeno Chara is still at this stage. Clearly not what he was before, but he's not completely cooked. We have had those moments of players just one day you're great, the next day it's done. For Sidney Crosby, is it a more gradual drop-off, or do you think it'll just be one day you're like, man, Sidney Crosby isn't Sidney Crosby anymore?
That's a great question. I think it'll be like Henrik Zetterberg. I think one day he just won't be Henrik Zetterberg anymore. And one day Sidney Crosby will wake up and he won't be able to perform at that level. That said, he is Crosby. He's one of the greatest of all time.
Even then, his level will still be above the average player because of the standard that he's set, right? You'll be like, oh man, he's still not Sidney Crosby. But compared to the average guy, like if it's like Jonathan Cheechoo, and no disrespect, but like 50 goal scorer and then all of a sudden out of the league. Like for Sidney Crosby, it'll be like, oh man, he's not Sidney Crosby anymore. He'll still be putting up like 20 or 30 points, I'm sure. Like he'll still be a useful NHLer. But that's just how high he's obviously set the bar. And he's also the first player in Penguins history with 13 seasons of at least 20 goals scored. You have Lemieux and Malkin both tied at 12. So anytime, obviously, you talk about Sidney Crosby leading this organization in a statistic, you know that comparison's immediately there to Lemieux, Jágr, and of course Malkin, who's been right alongside him the entire time. It's just absolutely insane. And obviously, too, you talk about like 16 seasons now for Sidney Crosby. It's like, where the hell did the time go? Where did the time go?
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be gradual. Now that you mention it like that, I agree with you. I think it's going to be gradual.
He might not ever drop off, though. He might retire before he does. Who's to say? Speaking of retiring before he's no longer great, Cody Ceci, at least as of 2 days ago, had an 11-point in 14-game run. And I know Rangers fans might view this as backhanded, but it does go to show that Adam Fox is already a measuring stick. But Cody Ceci has more 5-on-5 points than Adam Fox. And the Penguins as well currently have 25 different goal scorers this season, which is tied for Buffalo for most in the league. Buffalo obviously just throwing whoever the hell they can out there. But Pittsburgh being able to still be successful while doing it has been a trend of the past decade, and how they keep getting away with playing the likes of O'Connor or Radim Zahorna and still finding themselves at the top of a division. I have no earthly idea how they keep getting away with this.
Yeah. I don't know. It's upsetting. That's what I'll say. It's very upsetting.
Oh, goodness. That it is. And again, talking more about the Penguins here in a minute. We will move on to Washington. Quite an interesting couple of days for the Caps. I mean, granted, the Penguins 8 wins in their last 10. The Caps with 6 in their last 10. Alex Ovechkin missed a game, and he might miss more than just a game, as out with injury. It was his first game missed due to injury in 6 years. March 5th of 2015 was the last time he missed a game due to injury. He obviously missed 4 games earlier this season while in COVID protocol, and only one previous time in his career did he miss more than 4 games in a season. He missed 10 games in 2009-10. Deej, he has only missed 35 games in his career across 16 seasons. 17 of those due to injury. It's absolutely insane. We just talked about Crosby, and his ability to hold on. Ovechkin's durability has been absolutely insane. And it obviously lends, credence to that conversation of, does he catch Gretzky in goals if not for, lockouts and for COVID? I think he does, because again, he has just found that way to stay healthy for essentially his entire career.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to Ovi on this one when he very majestically said, Russian machine never breaks, in describing his injuries. I still think even with everything going on, with these lockouts, with COVID, with everything, I think Ovechkin can still catch Gretzky.
I mean, I think so too. I don't think it's that far-fetched. I mean, especially too, if he can continue to stay healthy. I hate to do it as well because he didn't do it in the Bruins uniform, but I also have to shout out Zdeno Chara for hitting 1,600 career games when talking about a player's continued durability. Like I said, I don't blame the Bruins for going with the youth, but it still hurts at this stage. It might even be worse than seeing Tom Brady win a Super Bowl in Tampa. Like, I'm still happy for Tom Brady. I don't hold it against him for leaving. It was the right move for both parties at the time. But it's like, by the time Brady won a Super Bowl, I'm like, okay, whatever. It's still a fresh wound to see Zdeno Chara in Washington. It really is. It doesn't sit well with me at all. Not one bit. I fucking hate it, to tell the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe for me, you know what? A great comparison, seeing Trocheck with Carolina. Hate him now. Burnt my jersey.
Well, speaking of burning jerseys, the New York Islanders and that fan base. Ultimately, not too much to talk about with the Islanders. Still in a pretty good spot. Only 5 wins in their last 10, though. Obviously going to be a playoff team. And then we get to the Bruins. And I know Rangers fans are holding on to dear life. The Bruins 4 points ahead of the Rangers. The Bruins with 2 games at hand as well. The Bruins have lost 2 in a row. The Rangers have won 2 in a row to try and close up that gap. Of course, for the Bruins, not necessarily ideal. They lost 6-4 to Buffalo in just a nightmare of a game, and then got shut out by the Penguins, 1-0 on Sunday. They play Pittsburgh again tonight, and play Buffalo again later in the week. All in all, Deej, you mentioned it, 2 games against the Rangers on May 6th and 8th. That will go a long way in deciding who ultimately claims this spot. Still think it's very much going to be the Bruins because obviously I'm backing them, and I still think overall it's the best for both teams. And I say that because, again, the Rangers, I still don't know if they have enough. I mean, hell, I don't know if the Bruins have enough, but I still don't know if the Rangers necessarily have enough in the tank to make a run here. But there is no denying, again, that they are set up very well for the future. Mika Zibanejad, who was one of the biggest fantasy busts at the beginning of this season, he just recorded his 3rd hat trick of the season. Capo Caco and Lafreniere heating up. They got Zach Jones to make his NHL debut. He picked up an assist in that game. The Rangers are still going to be very, very strong moving forward. I still say, if I'm a Rangers fan, as much as making the playoffs is nice, and people are going to say, well, you're just saying this because you're a Bruins fan, and that's fine. I still say, if you're a Rangers fan, you get another lottery pick, and that first-round pick has more value to you than making the playoffs does. Because you then have the ability to flip that player in trades to help you get missing pieces that you might need to then eventually make the run when this entire core is ready. I said it on the last show, I'm pretty sure. If not, it was the one before that. I still say the New York Rangers win a Stanley Cup in this decade. You know, the 2020s, the New York Rangers are going to win a Stanley Cup. I just think, again, that first-round pick this year and whoever they get from it is a little bit more valuable than making the playoffs. Deej, how do you see that 4th seed panning out at this stage?
You know, I'm not ready like I was last week. I'm going to say that it's 80-20 Boston. I can't say 100 at this point, especially after seeing these last 2 games.
That's fair.
With that said, I think you're 100% correct on the Rangers winning a cup this decade. And I'm going to go back to my argument that I've said 100 times. You need your 2 stars. You got Zibanejad. You got Panarin. Got a bunch of other great guys. You got Adam Fox. So really, the Rangers just need one of their 2 exciting young goalies to turn into a star.
To turn into Henrik Lundqvist.
Yeah, right. And you're a cup-winning team.
Yeah.
So, never let Artemi Panarin take a leave of absence again.
I mean, we talked about that. If Panarin doesn't step away for a bit of time this season, do the Rangers make the playoffs? And I think now more than ever we say yes. It's pretty crazy how that panned out. I'll mention as well for the Philadelphia Flyers, who, 5 points back of the Rangers. They do have a game at hand, but they're 9 points back of the Bruins. It's just not going to happen. But we will shout out Claude Giroux for becoming the 3rd leading scorer in Flyers history. He passed Brian Propp to make it to that stage. So shout out to Claude Giroux and the organization that I've seen Flyers fans say doesn't deserve him, which is tough to argue at this stage. Again, a nightmare season for the Flyers as well. New Jersey, hey, we'll shout out New Jersey, even though they have won 0 games in their last 10. They're an absolute free fall. But Buffalo, Deej, do you have anything to add about the Flyers or the Devils before I talk about Buffalo a little bit?
Not really. Just that Claude Giroux is to the Philadelphia Flyers what Matt Ryan is to the Atlanta Falcons.
That is a very, very fair comparison, in my estimation. With that, though, the Buffalo Sabres, an interesting time. they see Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen pick up his first win against the Bruins. He was the first Sabres goalie to win his first game since Mika Norinen in the year 2000. So history being made there. As well, Sam Reinhart, good old Samson, our pal Samson. Holy hell, has Sam Reinhart just turned it on for the back half of this season. He gets his fourth career hat trick and has hit 20 goals for the fifth time in the last 6 seasons. So Sam Reinhart continuing to be incredibly reliable, but as well, another player that has flourished after the coaching change and getting rid of Ralph Kruger, who was a player-friendly coach, but clearly didn't work. Rasmus Dahlin now has 11 points in his last 13 games. He started the season with 12 points in 36. So Rasmus Dahlin has awoken. Any conversation of like, oh man, it's right. Like, clearly, if there was any talk about, well, is Rasmus Dahlin the guy? He's the guy. You just need to get the pieces around him settled. Again, for Buffalo, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. It's clear. Eichel, Reinhardt, Dahlin, you have some of the pieces in place, obviously, to build around. You just have to not screw it up from here and get this train back on the tracks. Easier said than done with this organization.
Yeah, I agree. I think player-friendly coaches are not the best. In a lot of ways, having a player-friendly coach is like spending a lot of time hanging out with your uncle. At some point, I feel like, and this isn't for every organization, this is only certain organizations, there needs to be a divide between the coach and the players. There needs to be a sense of group accountability that I think for this young Buffalo Sabres team was very necessary. And sometimes having a player-friendly coach, you can't necessarily get that sense of group accountability, which you could even call locker room culture. It is very difficult to plant that seed unless they're under certain conditions. And, I mean, don't get me wrong, this is not a standard black and white conversation because there's the other end of this. There's John Tortorella, who is a player antagonist coach, if you will. So you got to strike a balance. And obviously Buffalo has made a right move here. The fog has lifted.
The great fog of Buffalo has cleared. Now we assess the damage and plan for how to move forward. Deej, let's move to our final division. Of course, it is the lovely Scotia, the Scotia North, with some interesting talking points here for every team. We will start off with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and I'm going to save some of the other controversy for Winnipeg. But Toronto at this stage, I mean, 5 in their last 10. They've won 2 in a row. They're clearly going to remain the top team. I mean, granted, Edmonton have 2 games at hand. They're currently 7 points back, so maybe the Oilers could make a run. For Toronto, though, Joe Thornton, and a positive note about Joe Thornton, he became the oldest player in Leafs history to score a goal, which is, pretty crazy. But they are also now without Zach Bogosian for the next 4 weeks due to a shoulder injury. So that defensive depth is going to be tested a little bit, and we talked about it. From an analytical standpoint, Zach Bogosian, not great, but that grit, leadership, physical side of things is definitely what he contributes, and he's done quite well for the Leafs in that role. So that can be a little bit of an overlooked loss at this stage. That could have a pretty big ripple effect throughout the Leafs' blue line heading into the playoffs. But then, again, we get into talking about Edmonton. Deej, shall we wax poetic about Connor McDavid, or do you have anything else to add about the Leafs before we talk about them a little bit more when discussing Winnipeg?
Well, I don't think Bogosian's that big of a loss. This team isn't really built around its role players. It's built around its goal scorers. As long as your goal scorers are scoring goals, Toronto's playing their game. This team's not built to grind things out or keep pucks out of the net. This team's built to put pucks into the net. So I don't think it's anything to panic over. I mean, obviously it's not ideal, but that's how I look at it.
In fairness, they are trying to change that, but again, we'll talk about that in a minute. Again, Edmonton currently in second. They have jumped Winnipeg. They're a point ahead with 2 games in hand. We talked about it before. Edmonton or Winnipeg, who gets the higher seed for home ice, which as much as that matters, which it really doesn't at this stage. But Edmonton, I think, is going to hold on to this 2 seed. And there's a couple different reasons for that regarding both teams. But for the Oilers, Connor McDavid hits 81 points. Will he hit 100, Deej? He needs 19 points in 10 games. Does Connor McDavid hit 100 points? He is currently on pace for 99. Does he get it done?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he does.
You had to think about that one, though.
I think he I did. I had to think statistically, right? Like, how many games has Edmonton played? They played 46. He will need to score at above his pace. So when you look at the remaining games, and I can't stress this enough, Tougie, I really need to put punctuation on this. In Edmonton's 10 remaining games, they play Vancouver 5 times. He will hit 100 points.
And there you go. He would be on pace for a 144-point season in a full 82-game schedule.
Oh, that's
Oh, God. There was a stat as well. This was from Matt Larkin. 5-on-5, the Oilers are plus 88 in scoring chances with McDavid on the ice. Without McDavid on the ice at 5-on-5, they are a minus 183 in terms of scoring chances. It really doesn't seem, Deej, as though they fixed that issue of the depth surrounding Connor McDavid. Clearly, in terms of scoring chances, when McDavid's not out there, they are getting dominated. And a big part of that, I mean, you look into it, outside of when Edmonton played Ottawa, and again, Edmonton swept Ottawa in their season series, both teams have 38 points on the year. So the Oilers have struggled against teams outside of playing Ottawa. I'd say they've been average, but so have they've been the same as Ottawa. It's just, again, if Ottawa wasn't swept by Edmonton, we'd had the conversation of Ottawa being closer towards actually being able to make it rather than being completely out of it. So it's just very interesting to look at Edmonton and a stat like that. The whole 5-on-5 stat really does kind of allude towards this team does still have quite a few issues to be concerned about if you're Edmonton, and it's why I can't say I have a ton of faith that they're going to make it out of this North Division just because how much... You know, we talked about it. Kaprizov, can he carry Minnesota? Probably not. Can McDavid carry Edmonton? That's a little bit more likely, but even then, how likely is it?
So to that, I will say, and I hate to keep beating on Vancouver, the Senators only have 1 game left against Vancouver. The Senators need to play Winnipeg 3 times still. They need to play their season series with Toronto is not over yet. They still have 2 more games against the Habs. At this point, when you look at that remaining strength of schedule, which is so important this year when we have these insulated divisions, I think that them both being at 38 points outside of their season series that Edmonton dominated, I think that's just a coincidence. I don't think that's an indicator that something's wrong under the hood with Edmonton.
Fair enough. And it is definitely one of those stats, I think, that you look at it and it's like, oh, okay. But, you know, I agree with your point that you can take a look at it a little bit more and say, okay, maybe there's not a direct correlation there. So that's fair enough. Let's move on to the most interesting team of the past couple of days. It is the Winnipeg Jets. Now, Deej, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the mudflinging back and forth, as I'll call it, between Winnipeg and Toronto and over the weekend was absolutely phenomenal, both from the teams and the fan bases. in terms of the conversation about what team is dirty and what isn't. And it started in a way with the game that they played. Joe Thornton cross-checking the ever-loving hell out of Nikolai Ehlers. Thornton also fined for an interference call against Matthew Perreault. Matthew Perreault happened to also elbow John Tavares in the head in that particular game. And Paul Maurice was quoted in saying this when he was asked if he believed the Leafs, if he believes the Leafs are a dirty team. He said, "I don't think so. The league has said they're not, so we'll abide by the league's ruling, but they're a poorer team. There's some fines, probably looking at some part-time jobs now." Paul Maurice is going to need more... I don't even know how to explain, how to describe the amount of shade being thrown out by Paul Maurice outside of comparing it to an Independence Day-like invasion. Bravo to Paul Maurice for the amount of sarcasm here. Big fan of that. But in the aftermath as well, you had an incident with Wayne Simmons getting tied up with Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Simmons was quoted in saying, "I'm sick of guys jumping on our goalie and being able to spear our goalie." As well, in the aftermath of this, Nick Ehlers is out for the rest of the regular season, which just absolutely bones Winnipeg and why Edmonton will stay above them after a hit from Jake Muzzin. A whole hell of a lot went down here. And again, I think you can see as to why there was so much trash talk back and forth between, again, not just the fan bases, but the teams, the players, the coaches as well. DH, right now, we've talked about it. The playoff matchups we would love to see. I am begging, as good as it would be to see Toronto and Montreal, I am begging the Habs to jump Winnipeg. A Winnipeg-Toronto first-round matchup right now is everything that I want in life after this past weekend. My God, it would be incredible. I want it so badly.
Yeah. I think everybody in hockey wants this very badly. And I think that's why, knowing the hockey gods, knowing how they work, I think we are going to see a second round of Edmonton versus Montreal.
Yes.
Knowing how badly I want this to come to a head, I feel like it's going to completely sputter out.
That's how it happens.
That said, Scheifele getting benched, Ehlers getting hurt. I think if there was a time for Montreal to make a run, it's now. If you want this spot, Montreal, clearly Winnipeg's falling apart by trying to be toxic. We've all seen it. We've seen an Eschel club overstep their bounds, try to invade the wrong chat. They turn on each other in an Xbox Live party. It falls apart. Everyone goes to bed upset. Can't sleep from the G Fuel. We've seen it. And that's what's happening to Winnipeg right now, is they appear to be turning on each other and they're frustrated. And it's weird for a team that has been so consistent this year, so quietly consistent, to be this weirdly frustrated, seemingly out of nowhere over this Toronto game. Like, I think it's very interesting. Like, this isn't something that, at least for me personally, I haven't really seen this brewing for a while. This seems to have kind of come out of left field. I don't know. Does it seem that way to you?
There's been a lot of talk this season about the locker room culture in Winnipeg, mainly spurning from the Patrick Laine trade. But, in the aftermath of that, there were questions about the leadership style, not only from Mark Scheifele, but especially Blake Wheeler and Paul Maurice as the head coach of this team. And now, like you mentioned, Scheifele was also benched, and Scheifele obviously expressed that he wasn't happy about this, but Paul Maurice had this to say: we have some things we value as a group. We have to adhere to our core values. Paul Maurice is an enigma, let me tell you. I don't know what necessarily is going on here. I really don't, in terms of what's going on with the Winnipeg Jets. But you talked about locker room culture. I don't know if there's a bigger question right now in terms of what the hell is going on with the team behind the scenes than there is for the Winnipeg Jets, especially with them being a playoff team. I genuinely don't know what to make of it, DeJ.
Yeah. I don't know what to make of it either. That's the thing. And especially just the physical distance between me and Winnipeg. I don't get a lot of Winnipeg news unless they make the front page of Reddit, which is very rare because like 30 people live in Winnipeg. It's not a lot of upvotes. For me, this seems to have come out of left field. Like Winnipeg is like just the quiet kid that you don't mess with. And for me, Mark Scheifele, who is regularly considered one of the smartest guys in the NHL, somebody that on a few different occasions has been mentioned as a future general manager of an NHL franchise, to see him get benched for this vague team conduct violation. I mean, obviously we talk about like toxicity in the locker room or whatever, but I don't know. And then he comes out afterwards and he says, I don't agree with the benching. So clearly, like, there is a thorn in Scheifele's paw here over something. Like, usually, like, you understand, like, oh, I got benched. Like, obviously, this guy's the head coach. I can't publicly disagree with him. But it's very interesting. I don't know. This whole thing is baffling to me. And I can't wait to have more insight into it.
I think they are definitely a team to look at now moving forward in terms of what could potentially happen here, where you see a situation, it's like, okay, maybe they got things to where they want it. And I think we could still see a lot of different changes here as it continues to play out. Not entirely sure how ultimately that is going to go. We'll move on to Montreal. Not too many points here, aside from the fact that, again, they're staying above Calgary. They're 6 points clear with a game at hand. Cole Caulfield made his NHL debut. Wasn't the most notable debut, but at the end of the day, still obviously so much hype surrounding Cole Caulfield, and rightfully so. But as well, to continue the shitting on Vancouver party that we have going on here, Tyler Toffoli hit 25 goals this season. It just keeps going from bad to worse for Canucks fans, DeJ, at this stage. What a phenomenal season for Tyler Toffoli.
Yeah. I mean, Tyler Toffoli has been the addition that the Canucks needed. It's just unfortunate that it was this year. Toffoli, one of those guys that on a team that really needed goal scorers. Outside of Brock Besser, they didn't really have a guy potting them. They got Toffoli, and now I still feel weird about like saying that guy's a fit here. Like, even though he's doing well on a team that's doing so terribly, you know what I mean? I feel like regardless of his singular contributions, you can't ignore the fact that the building's on fire.
I think that's a fair way to put it, and we'll save Vancouver for a later time here. I think we've hit the bag enough on this one. The hands are starting, the knuckles are really starting to feel it. Should have taped up the hands and not just thrown on the boxing gloves. Sometimes you need that extra bit of protection when you're going to just keep relentlessly punching this punching bag in the face. For Calgary,
I don't know, maybe I was just going to say, maybe we'll start giving out the Olli Jokinen Award for the best player on the worst team.
There we go. So who would it be for Vancouver at this stage? Maybe Thatcher Demko, based off of how the season's gone.
Honestly, yeah, probably for Vancouver. I think it does go to Demko.
Fair enough. All right. So with that, two quick notes here about the other two non-playoff teams in the North. The Calgary Flames are completely boned. Again, Noah Hannafin now out for the entire season. That's why I feel very confident in saying that the Flames are completely boned, because you are not making the playoffs without your best defenseman in Noah Hannafin. So a completely boned Flames team. And again, talk about teams that are going to have interesting off seasons coming up. Calgary is one of them. And for Ottawa, because again, we can't really mention too much in terms of positives, but we can mention when things are going relatively well. For the Sens, Drake Batherson, 17 goals on the season. Sens fans have kind of been riding that positive of, hey, we'll see, we'll just enjoy the younger players this season. And it's worked out quite well for them at this stage. So good for the Ottawa Senators. But again, we talked about it. Deej, you called it a couple weeks ago. The North Division is done. And I very, very much agree.
Yeah, I think in the slim chance the Flames got in, that would have happened starting with last night's game where the Flames played Montreal. They very unfortunately lost, and I think that cemented our playoff matchups.
I think so, too. So, Deej, with that, I think we are good to go for this particular show.
Yeah.
First one over 2 hours in a little bit, but again, I'm back to trying to be a normal person in the aftermath of a lot of housework that's still not done. Shout out to home renovations, but we're getting there. We should be back on Friday later on this week. And again, we'll have a bonus show as well on Friday. A big part of it that'll be over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Tougie24. A big part of that will be probably our breakdown of the NFL draft, unless we push that to the main show if there just happens to be very, very little to talk about, which there might be. Fingers crossed, though, that we continue to have more things to discuss here as we move closer and closer to the playoffs. With that, I mean, Deej, unless you have anything else to add, I think we're just about done here.
Yeah, I think we're done here. I think I'm going to save my beer league hockey stories for next episode, where we explore what a 30-plus Florida beer league hockey looks like.
I forgot all about that. Now I'm really mad that I have to wait. It's very upsetting. So keep an eye out for that particular show. Maybe they'll be on the main show again. You can follow myself on Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, everywhere else. TikTok as well. #ToogTalk. Tougie24 everywhere. And of course, Deej, DEJ 1088 on Twitter. Deej, your Jerry Springer-esque final thought to bring a close to yet another edition of the Tougies Take podcast.
Yeah, so I guess I just wanted to address, you probably noticed that I'm speaking differently this week. And I would like to address that in that I did some damage to my voice this week. And so now I have to talk differently. And I will say to you at home, if you don't want to damage your voice, pay the extra premium, get a good health insurance company, or else you'll end up talking like an old man who does nothing but smoke cigars for 2 days, and then you'll have to talk like you're hosting a go to sleep podcast for the next week. So this is my voice. You're not in a cult now. This is just how I have to talk for the time being.
Fair enough. Don't blow out your vocal cords yelling at people. We'll see you next time.
Yell at corporations.
Big corporations. To MLSE, pay your AHLers, scumbags. Scumbag corporations. Is that the title of the episode? Find out. You would have already known.
Yeah, go figure.
Oh, God.
All right, Godspeed, everyone.
Tougies Take is a DeJ Audio production. DeJ Audio, you're listening to it. Copyright 2021. See you next week.